All right. Hello and welcome to this episode where we're going to talk about limiting beliefs. And, specifically in this episode, we're going to continue on our series and talk about the third limiting belief from the book Letting Go by Dr. David Hawkins, which is we don't get anything from nothing. And so, before we dive into that, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Matt Cotty, and I am a licensed clinical social worker and the founder of Restored Minds. And real quick, before we dive into the show, we have some links and resources down in the notes so you can check those out. If you're looking for help on your journey when it comes to OCD and anxiety, as well as if you like the show and you benefit from it, we'd really appreciate if you could take a moment and just like and subscribe and either leave a comment or even a review on iTunes to help the show and help just the algorithm of the show. So with all that said, let's go ahead and dive into the topic today. So last week in our series, when we started this on beliefs, we talked about how beliefs are just stories we have, right? That generally operate how we navigate the world. And oftentimes we hold on to stories that are very, and I would say not beneficial, but even that, like, damaging for us. And so, the two beliefs we talked about so far is we only deserve things through hard work, struggle, and sacrifice. And then number two, suffering is beneficial or good for us. And you see, if you carry a story like that, just notice how that's going to perpetuate into all the different things in your life, right? So for instance, if you hold on to a story, let's just use an example of something to the effect of let's use the example today. We don't get anything from nothing. All right. And what does that mean? And you can look at how this can apply to different things. But let's pretend that you held that belief that I don't get anything from nothing, meaning that the only way that I'm going to get anything is if there's a trade, an exchange, right? I have to exchange some kind of value. There can't be a trade of me giving nothing and me receiving anything. And so when you hold that belief, anytime you receive something, you're going to feel the unconscious need to reciprocate or to give back because you're going to feel indebted to the person. Now, a lot of places use this as sales tactics, right? They give up front and then they expect you, and with the hope that you'll feel that and then ultimately buy. So if you go into like a really nice store or a car shop, usually what they'll offer you: free water, free coffee. They might offer you, just something, free food, and you'll be like, oh wow, this is really nice. And because you receive that, right? It's like, I can't get this for nothing. You're going to be more compelled to give them your business. And the law of reciprocity is a real thing. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't reciprocate when someone does something nice for you, because it's just like, I think, a natural human urge to have that homeostasis. And you can go into the ancient Incan concept of Aini, right, where there needs to be a balance of energy. But what we're really talking about here is that if you maintain this belief, it's going to be challenging to receive. Okay, because if you don't get anything from nothing, it's like like receiving something, you're not going to feel comfortable just receiving. And the problem is when you're hurting in life, or when you're sick, or when you have going through a challenging time, a lot of times you don't have anything to give, right? You're at the whim sometimes of other people's generosity, or other people's just good grace. And it's not that you can't pay it back down the road, but you have to be willing to sometimes accept help when you don't maybe have enough to exchange back. And that's an important thing in life, right? I think that's an important trait, is having a humility to be able to ask for help. And this is one way that this belief, I think, could really hold you back. Another thing is just like, receiving love from somebody. So if you're in a relationship and your significant other, right, is extending love, right? If you feel like you can't receive that, and because you didn't give something up front, then there's going to be this uncomfortableness of receiving, right? And so, but in order to really give something, you had to, like the paradox is in order to give love to people, you have to learn how to receive it. So a lot of people have a very hard time like receiving love and compassion from other people because they have this belief that they need to do everything, that it falls on them, and that they're the source, or they need to be self-reliant and all that stuff. And just notice that belief structure, how it can create such a unharmonious, situation in relationships right there, not to mention the various other places in life. And I when we look at this belief, it really is just about your willingness to accept your worthiness by default without having to feel like you have to exchange, right, in order to receive, especially when it comes down to things like love and compassion and emotional connection to people, that you don't have to justify your worthiness as a human being, or being, to receive that. And if you grew up in a household where that was communicated to you, you have to be able to identify that, acknowledge that you're carrying that belief, and start to work to challenge the belief. Because that's the one thing that this series is all about, is the idea that yes, we have limiting beliefs, but we can change them. The greatest power, in fact, that you have is to determine and identify and choose what you're going to believe, like the stories that you're going to operate from in this life. That is like your greatest power that you have. And a lot of people think that, well, it's just like there's these universal truths, and there's just the way things are. And I'd argue against that. For most cases, there's what you believe. And what you believe oftentimes determines what you see. Most people think that, again, seeing is believing, that you see something, so you believe something, and that's how it is, right? That and we think we're so logical minded, or so intelligent, that it's like, well, or I'll believe it when I see it, right? So that seeing is believing, not realizing that believing is what shapes the way you see everything. It shapes the way you operate. It shapes what you do. And that's why really beginning to understand your stories, especially the ones that are like, I won't even say they're subconscious. They're just kind of right on the fringe of consciousness. They're just these stories that you just assume are true. And one of the ways that we start to determine if something's a belief or not is we start to see, is there any evidence against this? Is there one aspect of, because if it was true, if it was a law, it would happen every single time. And this might happen every single time with certain people, right? So if you grew up in a household, you might assume it because maybe your parents operated a certain way, or you're in a relationship and then person operated a certain way. That doesn't mean it's true for everyone. It means it's true for that person. So that's a story about that person, not about the world, right? Or how the world operates. And when you start to go into the idea of we don't get anything from nothing, right? Meaning like I have to exchange, I have to put out in order to get. You can start to ask yourself, do you have any evidence of that not happening in your life, or not being an absolute truth? Like, has there ever been a time where someone has just been generous to you for no reason? I mean, one time that comes to my mind just immediately as I'm talking is I remember I was working this valet job when I was in college, and I went over to this little Mexican food dinner, for dinner, like little Mexican food restaurant for dinner, and I was just sitting there by myself. I was just sitting there, and I had ordered my meal, and I was sitting there and eating it, and I was just on my lunch break. And this older couple had saw me, and they said, "Hey," and they just picked up my check. I never spoke to them, never knew who they were. They just felt compelled to pay for my meal. And I was just like so taken aback by it. I was like, that's strange. And then I was very grateful, obviously. But it was just such a like, that person, those people, I should say, wanted to just extend that to me. And I could obviously list countless other times in my life where things like that have happened. People have helped me and had nothing to gain from it. And that so when but if you can start to operate that, hey, sometimes that does happen. The one thing that I think that opens up is for you to be able to receive, which I think is oftentimes harder for people than it is to give. I think a lot of people have a very difficult time receiving from people, especially when they feel like there is an imbalance for some reason, like they're not giving enough, or but we're receiving, like, especially something generous from someone, whether it's their time, energy, money, whatever it is. And 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 that difficulty, yes, like, there is the law of reciprocity, and I understand that. But that difficulty, I think, comes from this idea that, I can't get anything without exchanging. Like, it's not acceptable. When in some cases in life, it's the only option we have. And so I just wanted to, you know, talk about that one belief today, and then obviously we're going to talk about the next belief, which is going to be, things that are simple aren't worth much. And so that's going to be the last belief in this section. So I'm excited to do that. And with that said, hope this was helpful. Again, check out the resources in the notes, and then make sure to join us on the next episode where we close up this section on limiting beliefs. See you guys soon.